This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it. It is Monday. Can you imagine? It's Monday already. I spent the weekend in Texas. I was right there, up close and personal to Patricia. I'm going to post some videos today. Ivy and I were down there doing some work for a client of ours. Anyhow, the rain was torrential. We were in San Antonio. We were not in Houston, but we were pummeled by the rains there. Decided to give you an up-close and personal look at Patricia in the aftermath. A lot of flooding, about, 5 or 6 inches of rain in many parts of San Antonio. Nothing like what Houston's getting drenched with. Houston, still severe flooding issues there in the southern United States, as Patricia, well, it's left of it now. And here in Michigan, we got back to another spectacular fall day. Has this not been one of the greatest falls of all time? I was sitting there thinking yesterday, driving, as the sun was setting. We flew into DTW, of course, into Detroit, and driving back, the view of the fall colors was absolutely breathtaking. And what struck me as unusual is normally in years past, and correct me if I'm wrong, but normally in years past, the leaves would pretty much be gone by now. We would have had a big heavy rain and wind, and the rain would just be gone, right? And so I was driving back thinking, gosh, it looks great, in fact. And, it's incredible. So on the show today, we're going to talk about all sorts of things. We've got Ed Klein will be with us, the New York Times best-selling author. You've seen him on all the TV shows. He's written the bestseller about Hillary Clinton, Unlikable. He'll be here to discuss, her getting cover from everybody, from Joe Biden's exit from the race, which we'll have a little bit of that in a minute, and the fact that Bernie Sanders is protecting her from the press. Nobody wants to hear about your emails. But I think that the Republicans should be pleased that Hillary Clinton is the nominee. I think that the Republicans, if they're looking for a matchup against a damaged or weaker candidate, Hillary Clinton is it, because she is, as Ed Klein wrote, unlikable, in my estimation. We'll also have a discussion about Obamacare. 21 million people were supposed to be signed up by now for Obamacare. 21 million. What's the real number? Well, I can assure you it's not 21 million. And we'll have Tori Richards here from watchdog.org to talk about the EPA. The EPA was trying to get an enforcement wing. An enforcement and prosecution wing, just like the FBI. They wanted their people all be wearing sidearms and badges and go rolling into your house and tell you can be under arrest for... I'm serious now. That's not a joke, not hyperbole. They really wanted their own folks to come riding in. Let's start with this. Let's take a quick listen. I mentioned Joe Biden. He was on 60 Minutes last night. First time he has been in public with his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, to talk about why he decided not to run. He decided not to run because he didn't think he could win at this point, but make no mistake, he's there as a backup, as a safety net to Hillary is what it looks like to me. But he revealed to Norah O'Donnell the family's thought process behind the decision and the emotional moments that led up to it. Go.
I came home and Hunter, our son, was upstairs with Mom, with Jill. And I walked in and I said, I just don't think there's time. I've just decided I don't think we can run the kind of campaign we have to run to be able to win. And I remember Jill just got up off the couch, gave me a big hug and said, I think you're right.
Were you disappointed or were you relieved?
No, I think I was disappointed. You know, like I said in the beginning, I mean, I thought Joe would be a great president. And, you know, I've seen in the 40 years we've been together, I've seen, you know, the strength of his character, his optimism, you know, his hope.
I'm glad we're doing this interview. I'd like to hear Jill say all that stuff.
So I believed he would have been the best president.
You know what's interesting about Joe Biden and Dr. Jill Biden? Set their politics aside for a moment, if you will. The thing is, he's a likable candidate. He's an affable candidate. You know, he's kind of like, you know, Bernie Sanders gets a lot of attention because he's this goofy old guy that people like, and he's from Vermont, you know, and most people don't take him seriously. Those that do, well, I can't account for that, but most people don't take him too seriously, but they like him. They like the guy. And that's the key in large part. That's, again, Ed Klein joining us again today, who wrote the book Unlikable about Hillary. The only problem the Republicans have is if they put up a candidate that is less likable. You fill in the blank and do the math. Well, the problem is Donald Trump is not well-liked either, and he continues to say things that don't exactly endear him to large swaths of the voting public. Anyhow. Potential presidential candidate Bernie Sanders made headlines for finally admitting the truth now. Several times over the past week, as more and more people question how the country could ever afford his plans, which would cost some $18 trillion. He gets closer to telling the truth. Bill Maher pushed and prodded him on Friday. Flummoxed Sanders couldn't figure out exactly how to pay the untenable cost of his platform. Now the liberal media darling, George Stephanopoulos, finally gotten Sanders to say the truth. He plans on raising everyone's taxes, which probably made Stephanopoulos, the former Clinton man, a little bit giddy, the guy that has contributed to the Clinton Foundation and elsewhere, but still takes himself as a journalist. Apparently they takes himself seriously. What a joke. The Vermont senator appearing on This Week with George Stephanopoulos on ABC News. Anything but courage, because if you had courage, you would have fired him long ago. Where he pressed, but you know, the fact that they hired him in the first place, a joke. He pressed him on what the actual cost would be to Americans. After some back and forth, Bernie finally admitted that he will be raising everyone's taxes, not just the rich, as many of his supporters believe. Of course, they don't know what rich or poor is. I think if you're looking about guaranteeing paid family leave and medical leave, which virtually every other major country has, that will require a small increase in the payroll tax, said Sanders. That's going to hit everybody, said Georgie Porgy Puddin' Pie. That would, yeah, that would, Bernie admitted. Of course it would. It's $18 trillion. Bernie will raise tax on everyone, and that's just the kicker. If Sanders were to become president, he would severely devalue the dollar as well. Devalue the dollar. You know what that means? That's right, inflation. Tremendous amounts of inflation. Your dollar's not worth as much. You got to use many more dollars. That's called inflation. We don't talk about that much anymore. Not the way we did in the 1970s and early 80s. Inflation is a serious problem. It devalues your spending abilities. Just getting back to basics. It's 14 after on a Monday morning on the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
It's Monday, and welcome to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. We encourage your common sense input. You can find out more at stevegruber.com as well, and go to the Facebook page, The Steve Gruber Show. Like us there. You can find my posts, my musings, my videos, but not my phone number. Sorry about that. A woman who reportedly has mental issues and was not drunk as first thought has used a car that she obtained legally to murder and maim dozens of innocent people on Saturday morning. Witnesses say 25-year-old Adacia Chambers crashed through a parked police motorcycle before smashing into the crowd gathered for the Oklahoma State University homecoming parade. Victims thrown as high as 35 feet in the air during the horrible incident. Like I said, it was originally thought the Stillwater, Oklahoma native was high on drugs or alcohol, but her attorney says she is not a normal, acting, or competent person. He couldn't say that he said, I'm not a health professional, but she is not a competent person. I can assure you of that. Despite the suggestion of mental illness, Chambers has been charged with several counts of second-degree murder. 4 people, including a 2-year-old boy, died from being hit by the car. 47 more suffered injuries. Many remain hospitalized this morning. Some, at least 5, in critical condition. Reports indicate that Chambers had a complete background check to obtain a legal driver's license, and the small sedan was apparently also obtained legally and licensed legally, but it is clear the car should never have been in her possession. This is just one of the many incidents each day in America where innocent people are slaughtered because of cars. Yeah, and I think we can simply wait no longer to stop this epidemic of death. We must enact common sense motor vehicle registration and restriction laws to keep cars and trucks out of the hands of those that simply should not have them. We can no longer protect the big car manufacturers and their friends in Washington. We can no longer look the other way when those from special interest groups defend the private ownership of cars and trucks. The death, the destruction, and quite simply the bloodshed must end. The carnage in Oklahoma, just another tragic chapter of cars being used to kill people, and was unbelievable according to eyewitnesses. Conda Walker, an OSU graduate who was still in Stillwater with her sister to celebrate homecoming, said she was only about 50 feet from the horrible crash scene. She said it took a few seconds to process what had actually happened. There were bodies and injured people lying all over the place. One woman was a crumpled mess on the road. They turned her over and began CPR, but we quickly realized she didn't make it. The deadly crash involving the 2014 Hyundai Elantra sedan further underscores why private citizens should simply not be operating motor vehicles any longer. It's pretty clear the 35,000 people that are killed needlessly each year in this nation have to be honored, and it's time to put an end to it. It is time to hold car manufacturers accountable for the toll they inflict each year on communities and families. With current technology that allows vehicles to be driven by computer-guided programs with satellite assist, there is just no need to allow Americans or anyone else to operate cars and trucks not privately. In addition, the misuse of cars for frivolous activities like joyriding or going to get pizza on a Friday night when there are simply other options to eat at home just further contributes to the major crisis of global warming as well. If we can stop the needless deaths of thousands from motor vehicle crashes each year and save the planet, at the same time, we simply must act. For the sake of future generations, we must take a stand against the destruction that comes from building, operating, and ultimately abusing cars and trucks in this nation. I, for one, have had enough. I urge you to join me in my effort. Parents aligned to remove cars. Parents aligned to remove cars, or PARC for short. It's time we took the keys away from everybody for good. We can save 1,700 young people's lives, save them from dying each year, plus tens of thousands of others, and stem the rise of oceans and the melting of polar ice caps. Our future simply depends on you saying enough, America. What is more important, your freedom and that of your children, or saving lives and ending global warming? You decide. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Scientists, by the way, have once again had to counter myths promoted by environmentalists that hydraulic fracturing or fracking is causing earthquakes around America. Back to sane programming now. Hydraulic fracturing, commonly known as fracking, does not appear to be linked to any increased rate of magnitude 3 and larger earthquakes, says the United States Geological Survey, the USGS. Scientists. The controversial method of hydraulic fracturing or fracking, even though that may be used in the drilling, is not physically causing the shakes. According to William Ellsworth, a scientist with USGS, in a report to the Associated Press, the scientific consensus has long been that fracking doesn't cause magnitude 3 and larger earthquakes, but media and environmental groups don't like that particular scientific consensus and, well, have frankly decided to ignore it. Fracking earthquake myths from environmentalists are so widespread that the USGS actually maintains a myths and misconceptions section on its website just to address such, well, idiocy. Earthquakes are measured on a logarithmic scale, and the difference between whole numbers on the scale is huge. A 9.0 earthquake can devastate a country, while a 3.0 quake generally can't be felt at all. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, yeah, fracking, it's powering America. It's causing an American energy renaissance so that we're not suffering from energy poverty. It's not causing earthquakes or causing your tap water to burst into flames. I'm here to calm your fears. Part of my job. I take it seriously. 25 after on a Monday, it's the Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
It's 33 after. If you'd like to join the conversation, 888-900-9966. So, Alex jumps out. So, what do you want to talk to the professor about? Well, I want to talk about, flooding and chaos, hoo-ha, Hillary and Joe Biden, and more hoo-ha. There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, there's a lot of debris flying around out there that I think is aptly called hoo-ha, which is a blanket statement. It's an umbrella that covers all the nonsense that goes on, from George Stephanopoulos to, Bill Maher, to yours truly, and everything else in between. So there you have it. Professor Allan Saxe, the professor of political science at the University of Texas, Arlington, the professor himself here with us again. Professor, welcome back.
Good morning. And by the way, I believe you're exactly right. It's called life. Yeah.
So, you come here voluntarily to talk about these things. After all this time, you still find this fascinating, intriguing. You find it, a good exercise, not only for yourself, because you stay sharp in the topics, but therefore you can have these conversations with your students that are, well, shall we say, sometimes not that engaged.
Well, yesterday I spoke at a church. I will not name the denomination, a mainline Christian denomination. And they asked me to speak about presidential politics. Bad idea. I should stay away from that. And I got clobbered. And at the end of it, there was a woman who said, you know why you don't like President Obama and Hillary Clinton? It's because you don't like black people. Said,
they really said that to you.
Hillary Clinton is not black. And if you look at the great popularity and approval of Dr. Ben Carson, you'll understand that a lot of people who are very conservative or libertarian, it's not a question of race. It's a question of what they stand for politically. She didn't get it. I mean, literally, she didn't get it.
No, because that's what she's been told to believe, not taught to, told to believe. I mean, how embarrassing for people that they're that gullible.
That's right.
So how big was this church? I mean, were they didn't have tomatoes or anything? They weren't pelting you from the third row.
No, it was I think most of them were really with me and sort of embarrassed, but there was one lady and maybe one of her allies who were just, intractable, and they kept yelling, you don't have the evidence, and when I give them the evidence, well, you're just making that up. It was incredible. But you begin to understand the mindset of what this election is going to be all about. There are some die-hard, pro-Hillary people. It doesn't matter what you say, they're with her.
It doesn't matter what she does.
That's right.
What she's guilty of.
That's right. It doesn't matter. It does not matter.
Yeah, it does. It is a little baffling, isn't it? I mean, here's the thing. You see Joe Biden bail out, and we just listened to him give us some comments on 60 Minutes from last night. Basically, I walked into Jill, and I said, Jill, I think that we don't have enough time. And I'm like, who makes this stuff up? I mean, seriously. And then we hugged, and it was a very special moment for shut up. I mean, come on.
I know. You begin to say, who are these people?
I mean, come on.
My argument yesterday at this church, and it's a wonderful church in many ways, but you begin to recognize the country is so split apart already, and you're going to bring in a woman like Mrs. Clinton, who by all accounts is also extremely divisive to the country. You're going to bring her in the midst of a country that is already disunited, mad at each other, and you're going to bring her in to try to unify the country, which is what the role of a president is supposed to be. And it's probably not going to work very well.
Yeah, I think that you've got some real difficulty there. But here's the thing. I think that the Republicans should be pleased that Joe Biden didn't get in. Now, I, for one, thought for sure, and I've been saying for months that he was going to get in, and I did too. I was surprised that he did not. But you know what? He left enough out there that if she capsizes at some point, if she gets indicted by, everybody wants to talk about the Benghazi hearing. Well, nothing came of it. Well, the fact that she's sending emails to her daughter saying that it was a terrorist attack ought to be a lot more significant than it's getting credit for on the same day of the attack that she's telling everybody else is about a video, which you know better. But if she capsizes or gets indicted by the FBI, that nobody's talking about that investigation, which could be a lot more dangerous to her than anything else.
It could, but I doubt if any of that's going to happen. By the way, it was never brought up at the hearings. I could have asked better questions than the Republicans did at that hearing.
That's not surprising.
For example, the president of Libya also admitted that it was a terrorist attack, and he said that almost immediately after. And it was even reported on some of the mainline media, but I guess forgotten at the hearings the other day. Also, they should have asked her questions like, you deleted on your own volition 30,000 emails that you considered private. How are we to believe that you knew exactly what is private and what is official, and you did it on your own? 30,000 emails. And the other thing is, why did you disregard the First Amendment of the United States Constitution in regard to that jerk who did that anti-Islamic video? It's called the First Amendment, and they put him in jail.
And he's still in jail.
Parole violation, and that wasn't brought up either. Those are important issues about the First Amendment.
Well, Professor, hold on. It's very difficult to ask deep, relevant, probing questions when your time is spent grandstanding.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. And when you have Elijah Cummings and some other Democrats...
Good Lord, do we have to have him out there? Oh, my Lord. Elijah Cummings, I don't care what the truth is. I'm here to protect Hillary.
That's right. That's exactly what he should have said.
What do you mean? You might as well just say that.
That's right. It is awful tough. And this woman yesterday at church, I'm using her because she represents so much, I think, of what we're going to hear in the debate going on for the next year. She said, Hillary Clinton has been pilloried all of her political life, and nothing has stuck. And I'm saying, that's the point. Nothing has stuck, So it's amazing how they use all the background about Mrs. Clinton and her husband, and the fact that nothing has really happened to them. Well, Bill Clinton was impeached, but aside from that, they use that as a plus.
Yeah, it's an absolute head scratch. Now, the Republicans now are going to get back together, and the Republicans and correct me if I'm wrong here, Professor, the Republican race has gotten a little bit quiet and, well, shall I say, boring as of late. I mean, it's just dull, isn't it?
It really is, except for Donald Trump occasionally outbursts, and he said the other day something that I have to admit is a little bit outrageous. He says that Dr. Ben Carson, who's leading him in the polls in Iowa, is not energetic enough. He's not emotional enough or energetic enough. I'm sort of paraphrasing. And you want to say, that's what we like about him. That's what we like about Dr. Ben Carson. He's very deliberative. He's soft-spoken, and yet he says the right things 99% of the time. And but Donald Trump was screaming. Also, he was literally screaming and saying, how could I be second in Iowa? How could I be second in Iowa behind Dr. Ben Carson? And you want to say to Mr. Trump, well, that's what the polls say, Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
So there are some funny things. And, of course, Jeb Bush looks like he's in some financial difficulty with this
Something's
campaign.
going on. Now, hold that thought, because we need to come back to that. And I'm going to take a break here real quick. But Jeb Bush, all of a sudden, scaling back his spending. And the question is, why? We're on with Professor Allan Saxe here, political science at the University of Texas in Arlington. Hold on, Professor. We'll be right back on a Monday edition of the Steve Gruber Show.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
Love when I can. Turn loose my hand, 'cause I'm going.
All right, and welcome back to it. It's 45 after the hour.
Catch if you can.
And we're on with Professor Allan Saxe this morning, as we are on Mondays. And if you ever need to get back and review something that we discussed here on the program, go to stevegruber.com. You can find previous programs and selected interviews like that with Professor Saxe. That, again, is at stevegruber.com. Now, the professor mentioned just before the break, Jeb Bush scaling back his spending, and I was a little surprised at that. I thought he had $100 million.
I did too. I thought he was in much better financial shape. But once they start scaling back and cutting back their staff, and I think he's done that in Miami area, it doesn't look good. That's exactly what Governor Rick Perry did, the former governor of Texas. He began to scale back, and then a couple of weeks later he got out of the race entirely. That may not happen with Jeb Bush because he probably has just better name recognition, maybe has a super PAC going for him. So I think that probably he can withstand it if he wants to. But it really doesn't look very good for his campaign. And you could see the exasperation when he was talking about some of this. He's so frustrated with Donald Trump. He said at the end, he said, well, go ahead and elect Donald Trump. He's sort of, yelling back at the electorate, go ahead and elect him if you want to elect him. Go ahead and have Donald Trump for president. So you could see the exasperation on Jeb Bush's face, and I can understand that. Here's a man, former governor of Texas, brother of the President of the United States, came into this election cycle thinking that he was going to really do very, very well. And by the way, in listening to him and his advertisements, his political commercials, he sounds pretty good. He sounds very strong, very conservative, but I think a lot of things that have stuck to him, like his embrace of common cause, the fact that he's considered to be a mainline establishment Republican, that's what's hurt him. But if you just look at his commercials and a lot of his interviews, he really comes off pretty good in my estimation, but I think he's in political trouble.
Well, clearly, because is he holding his money back now to do a push before the first votes are cast? Because Rand Paul is out there saying, I will not leave this race until votes are cast. Is Jeb Bush, do you think, of the same opinion?
It could very well be. And I think that Senator Paul is exactly correct in regard to that. Because a lot of people, when you look at these polls, the polls are pretty accurate sometimes. But a lot of these people may not show up, especially at something called the Iowa caucus and the New Hampshire primary. These are things that do not draw great masses of people to the polls, or even Republicans. So it depends on how these polls are worded. If they just go after likely voters, that's one thing. If it's a more broad-based poll among Republican voters, that's something else.
Let me ask you something else here. And you mentioned you speaking at church yesterday and talking to the people, the churchgoers there, about race and so forth. And I want to play you a clip now from Ben Carson from yesterday. Ben Carson speaking about abortion and so forth, and how you think this may play, race notwithstanding. Go ahead and roll that.
Ultimately, I would love to see it all the time.
And that means all abortions illegal, or is there still an exception that you would have?
I'm a reasonable person, and if people can come up with a reasonable explanation of why they would like to kill a baby, I'll listen.
Life and health of the mother?
Again, that's an extraordinarily rare situation. But if in that very rare situation it occurred, I believe there's room to discuss that.
Rape and incest?
Rape and incest, I would not be in favor of killing a baby because the baby came about in that way. And all you have to do is go and look up the many stories of people who have led very useful lives who were the result of rape or incest.
Then, of course, Dr. Ben Carson, and of course he will be pilloried by the mainstream media for saying that basically he wants to overturn Roe v. Wade and would say almost no exceptions. How does that play in prime time, if you will?
Probably not very well. It certainly plays very well with me, but I don't. And it shows, I think, how deliberative and how thoughtful this gentleman is. He's an amazing individual. In fact, a lot of people, and I got this yesterday in church as well, he doesn't have any experience. And I'm saying that's why we like him. He doesn't have any experience. But aside from that, he answered that question some weeks ago on an interview. He said he would bring together various experts in various fields to advise him. And he has wisdom. And so if he brought in together experts in various fields, domestic policy, international policy, that to me sounds excellent. And by the way, when we look back at what has happened with all these people that have so much experience, you begin to say, oh my gosh, what have all these experienced people done to us?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, and here's the thing. Right now, because it just seems like after the first debate, the second debate, it was kind of interesting. I think people maybe it's just that kind of lull in the race where people have kind of lost interest a little bit for a period of time.
I agree with you. They really have. In fact, I even find some of my students who are following this, I ask them to follow this on both sides, and some of them say, I'm so tired of this already. And I said, it hasn't even really started yet, and they're tired of it, And that, I think, could be true of the general public. But this coming presidential season is so critical. I know a lot of people say that is said all the time. It probably is, but this time it's really true.
Yeah. Well, Professor, it's always an education, and hopefully you can go convince your students that politics actually matters, because it really does.
And a few of them, I have to admit, are really coming around, not necessarily to my side at all, but a few of them are pretty thoughtful people, and they're Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, whatever.
Well, I guess we'll, you got to start somewhere.
That's right.
You got to start somewhere. All right, Professor,
Thank
always
you
a
very
pleasure.
much.
All right, there you have it, Professor Allan Saxe, political science professor, University of Texas at Arlington. Didn't even talk about the rain down there. I saw plenty of it. I'm sure he has as well. It's a Monday at 52 after.